Waves TV. My name is Eric Francis Coppolino, the editor of PlanetWaves.net, author of the Planet Waves horoscope column. Thanks for joining me for today's edition, which will focus on the forthcoming, or currently happening, depending on when you're listening, retrograde of Mercury. This takes place in Pisces, and Aquarius begins in Pisces. Early Pisces winds up in late Aquarius, and has already been underway for some time, since we have been in the lead-in shadow phase as well as the storm phase. Mercury retrograde is one of those things that's become more of a thing since the internet has existed to tell us about it. There are lots and lots of overstatements, overgeneralizations, and misunderstandings, and therefore needless fears associated with Mercury retrograde, though generally I have found in many, many years of astrological practice, meaning working with clients and doing mundane astrology, and then also experimenting with Mercury retrograde, including making major purchases during it and on either end of it. And I've basically kind of thrown my body into the machine of Mercury retrograde over the years to find out like what this is about, and then I've compared notes with many other people. And what I have found overall is that it is helpful to honor what this transit represents, which means avoiding commencing actions before or during the retrograde, right? So by commencing actions, I mean that when Mercury is stationing retrograde, when it is retrograde, for that matter, when it's about to station direct, that's not a good time to put your condo on the market. It's not a good time to do anything that can wait a few weeks and will not specifically immediately negatively impact that thing. And then many things that that you think can't wait actually can wait. And what I found is that it will typically save time to honor Mercury retrograde. That said, the retrograde begins on Sunday, the 16th of February, and it ends on March 9th. March 9th is a Monday. It begins Sunday evening Eastern time, and then it ends on Monday evening Eastern time at a little bit later, 10:49. The exact time doesn't matter so much. What matters is the day of the station, one way or the other, and the few days surrounding it are particularly important to keep an eye on. And generally, the kind of thing you want to do is take steps to avoid misunderstandings. If you find that email is getting squirrely, go to the phone and sort something out by phone. Take the extra steps to make your communication clear. I think that more than Mercury retrograde is a phenomenon of physics, it is really a creature of the mind. It's a creature of consciousness. And and as such, we need to take care of our awareness. And the more aware we are, and the more careful we are, the more meticulous and conscious of steps we take, the better. Leave yourself plenty of time when traveling. Leave yourself a financial cushion. If possible, make sure that all of your bills are paid, and nip problems in the bud. If your internet goes out, make sure you solve it immediately before the problem compounds. The other really common thing I've seen happen a lot with Mercury retrograde is attempting to fix something that's not broken. And so in the process of fixing something that's not broken, something actually can be broken. And so one of the tricks of the mind is that there is a sensation of something being out of sorts when actually it's not. And generally when troubleshooting with Mercury retrograde, I suggest starting with the very simple and very obvious. Is it turned on? Is it plugged in? If your computer's acting up, go through the settings and make sure that the settings line, test things out first, and don't make any assumptions if you can avoid it. We all, of course, make assumptions, but the fewer the better under Mercury retrograde conditions, and know when you're doing it. But the extra time cushion and the extra level of planning is really helpful. So anyway, let's take a look at this retrograde. I've made this chart nice and big, so you can see it clearly. So here's Mercury. You can see it's got the little horns on it, and it stations retrograde on Sunday, the 16th, at this time up there, 7:54, and so it's got the little RX next to it. So normally a planet's going to proceed in the direction of the higher number, but instead Mercury is now going to proceed in the direction of the lower number. So Mercury is going to go in this direction. It's going to appear to go. That's the retrograde, and it's sometimes said to be an optical illusion. It's not actually an optical illusion. What's happening when Mercury is retrograde is that Mercury is passing in between the Earth and the Sun. It's close to us, and that is one of the most important parts of it is Mercury is nearby, and I do think that the big massive hunk of magnetized iron that is Mercury has an effect on our nervous systems, which are conducted in electrical energy. Our whole energy field is affected by electromagnetism, or magnetism in this case, and then additionally the Earth's magnetosphere is influenced in some way. But I think that, again, more than anything, this has the property of affecting our minds, our consciousness, more than it affects material objects. All right, so let's consider some of the spiritual implications of this retrograde. First of all, we can see there's a planet near the retrograde. It's a very slow-moving planet, and that means that Mercury has already made a conjunction to it, going in this direction as it reached its retrograde point, and then it's going to make a second conjunction. Really, the whole thing is in a continuous conjunction for quite a long time. Well over 2 weeks, I would say, is a conjunction of Mercury and Nessus. And FYI, if you look around on Planet Waves, for example, check the daily astrology for the weekend, this particular weekend of the 15th and 16th, you'll see that I linked to an article called Mercury Weaving the Story of Nessus. And so the Mercury conjunction to the Centaur Nessus is so significant that I've covered it in a full-length researched article that gives the mythology of Nessus in detail, and talks also about the healing implications of Nessus, which all center around the one of the main, I would say, psychotherapeutic issues of our time, which is victim consciousness. We live in a time when it is basically, quite sadly, considered cool to be a victim, and there are some realms of political discourse where you're not welcome if you don't have some claim to being a victim. And then finally, there are people who are actually subjected to things that would have them qualify for being a victim. And then we live in an era and in a society that doesn't give us much in the way of healing modalities or ways to reframe or reconceptualize victimization, and we therefore are left with the problem, and it does not get resolved, generally speaking. And so one of the things that's likely to happen as this Mercury Nessus conjunction develops is there's going to be things that come up for people, and this is the time to let them come up rather than to suppress them. Again, one of the things our society does quite a bit of is to suppress. We suppress symptoms, we suppress feelings, we suppress history, we suppress experiences, and so there's a lot of suppressed, depressed energy going around, which basically all fits the general category of holding down, right? And so when Mercury is in this condition, material is likely to come up, and what you want to do is let it come up and consider it, feel it. You don't need to go diving all the way in. One of the approaches to the emotional realm that I learned from Hakomi therapy training is to stay around the edges of the feeling and to feel the heat and smell the smoke, but don't actually throw yourself in to the flames and get burned. Okay, so that is that, and we need to be questioning these concepts of victimization. And at a certain point, we need to reject the entire concept entirely in order to proceed with healing. There's only so much you can do when your mind is in blame mode, no matter who you're blaming, whether you're blaming yourself or blaming someone else. There's only so much that you can do. All right. So what then happens is that Mercury retrogrades at a certain point toward the end of the retrograde, probably in about 2.5 weeks from today, so I'm guessing around March 5th or so, but I'm not looking at the ephemeris. Mercury is going to retrograde into Aquarius. And this shifts the orientation from the kind of foggy emotional orientation of Pisces into a more clear-headed and rational orientation of Aquarius. These two signs make a wonderful complement being next to each other, because one tends to be more about the hard edges of consciousness and the other tends to be about the completely boundaryless experience of feeling and being receptive. Aquarius is a little more yang. It's more expressive. It's more assertive. And so what we go from is an emotional process into a more active thought process. And what we get is this fantastic opportunity to go through an emotional process, then to consider it in a way that is fully mentally aware and rational, and then to make some decisions about it. And so the days leading up to the Mercury station direct, maybe let's say March 5th through 9th, and even a little bit after, are a good time to make decisions about what you learned, to make decisions about what came up for you during the retrograde. Meanwhile, stay dry. Mercury is retrograde in Pisces, and just so you can see that, it's quite close to Neptune. Neptune has a very wide orb of influence, and so this Mercury station retrograde certainly counts. I did a major article on Neptune that I published in Thursday's edition. That's up on planetwaves.net. It's called P.S. Mercury in Pisces, Parallel Worlds, and it's my first major piece about Neptune, and it's fairly comprehensive, though there's one issue I didn't address that I'd like to address, which is the obsession with image in our culture. Our culture tends to be obsessed with image, and in many ways responds only to image. I didn't get into that, but you can see that it's implied, and as you read the article, just frame it in the context of Mercury retrograde, and you'll be able to put some pieces together. And by the way, for those who are studying astrology, ultimately in the end, you have a bunch of pieces, and you're, as the astrologer or even the astrology fan or recipient, you're the one who has to put the pieces together and then make sense of everything that you just heard. So in the end, you make up the story. So make sure that it's a balanced story, and we do get quite a bit of that with this Mercury retrograde. That is a balance between the receptive feeling body and the active thinking body. All right. Thank you for tuning in. Once again, don't forget to check out planetwaves.net. I may or may not do a Planet Waves FM this week. If not, this at least covers the territory of Mercury retrograde. And don't forget to look for that article on the daily page, An Expert's Guide to Mercury Retrograde as well. All right. Once again, thank you, and bye for now.